I will. So first off, hi, my name is Lauren Glessing. I am a speech therapist at Owl Therapy Services. I just want to thank you so much to the people here and online for attending this morning. I realize your time is very valuable and you took your time away from loved ones to be here and to learn and listen. And I hope I can help you and you can learn something today that you didn't know before. I'll also share that, it's a conference, tech issues might happen. So while I was making the PowerPoint this week, it looked great on my PowerPoint screen, but then sometimes in presentation mode, bits and pieces will be missing, and I see some nods. So I know that might not be the only person that has that going. So oddly, I would be able to see it on my computer and just not up. So if that happens, I will fill in the blanks for you. Okay. So like I said, I'm a speech language pathologist, and I obviously work with communication. And people that often don't work with a speech language pathologist or have really known a speech pathologist might think, oh, I hear this a lot. You fix S's and L's, in the schools, right? And yes, we do. But communication obviously is so much more than that. So that's what this presentation is about, is that it's all communication. And I'm really passionate about this topic, and I'll get more into that in a little bit. So again, I'm Lauren. I'm a speech therapist at Owl Therapy Services. I was a previous speech therapist at Jefferson Elementary. I was also the lead speech pathologist for the Rochester Public Schools and supported all the speech therapists there. My most important job is I'm a special needs caregiver. I have an older sister with Down syndrome, and I'm her legal guardian and kind of helped her throughout both of our lives to learn and grow. And I have a special interest in pre-verbal and behavioral needs. Notice I didn't say nonverbal. I like saying pre-verbal because sometimes that connotation of nonverbal means they don't communicate at all. Well, they're nonverbal, so, and that's not the case. So again, today's objective is to have you feeling empowered versus overpowered by information. You guys have a lot thrown at you. And from what I know, if you have a loved one, on the spectrum or that has special needs or accommodations, you also become a detective, and you are usually online researching and reading, and that can be a blessing or a curse sometimes. So you have a lot thrown at you, and then you have a lot that you look for yourself. So it's a lot of information. I'm hoping that I can help you not feel as overwhelmed, and to also let you know that you have a lot of support in your corner. I also want to identify ways that you can start today and tomorrow to build upon communication skills. I have a slight pet peeve of going to conferences and hearing about who the presenter is and maybe what offerings they have. And then at the end they say, we're out of time, but we'll get to the practical stuff later. You can go to my website. You kind of leave feeling like you didn't really learn much. I also want you to understand the different ways that you can help your loved one succeed and determine if speech therapy services would benefit your family. So I could give you a lot of background information on autism, but I will not. I don't know if you had heard our keynote speaker yesterday. How amazing was he? And you also are here more than likely because you have a loved one on the spectrum. And you probably know more about autism than I do. So I'm not going to go into the who's and how's and all of that because professionals are not always the ones with the most extensive research and information. I may be an expert on communication, but you are an expert on your loved one, and that will go leaps and bounds for me to help you. And the main focus of today's presentation is one of the pillars of autism and breaking down that pillar of social and functional communication. So what are the reasons for communication? Obviously, to get what you want, right? To communicate something. But over the years, I've categorized them into basically 3 categories. I'll preface it by saying this isn't, a scientific article. This is my anecdotal experience, and I've really found this helpful for me and to explain it to other people. So one of the reasons for communicating is what I call primal or survival. So not knowing what to do and relying on primal instincts to either obtain the skill or go into fight or flight. Okay. So what does this look like? Well, if you think about the words primal or survival, if you had to communicate to survive, what might that look like in a not verbal way? I immediately go to maybe if something's wrong, you might run. If you're being hurt, you might kick, bite, scream, run away. Like I said, hide. We talked about that fight, flight, or freeze yesterday quite a bit in those presentations. And if you think about that, you might start to think of a loved one or someone that, maybe you've had in a classroom of yours or a child on your caseload that's exhibiting that skill. So are they really not communicating? Because I think they're communicating quite a bit. The next level is what I call transactional. So this is a simple exchange that will obtain something, right? So if anyone's familiar back in the day with the PECS, picture card exchange communication system, they use it kind of interchangeably, but I reference that quite a bit with that transactional, because the actual formal PECS communication training had you exchanging a blank piece of paper at first to get the child or the person to understand that transactional experience, and then adding in the picture symbols. I think about just us in the world. What's a transaction that we do almost every day? Buying something, right? I give you this card, I get my soda, I get my pop, right? So if you think about it, these types of communication categories happen to us every day and multiple times a day. Okay. So again, often I think of this from a speech perspective. I'm going to use a child in a classroom as an example for a lot of these examples, but could be hitting a button, right? Could be just saying one word. So for example, if a child says candy and you give them a piece of candy, I consider that a transactional response, because the child just wants one thing, right? A lot of times in this transactional stage with people and children that are learning to be more verbal, this could look like a person who doesn't really know what the word is. They just know if they say it, they get something, right? So if you think about it, I've worked with a lot of kids and adults in the past years, but it would be a kid walking up to an adult and just going candy, and then walking up to another one going candy, and just hoping that they would get a piece of candy, right? So they know if I say this, I will probably get something, and they'll try it over and over and over again. But again, I often see children on IEPs, individual education programs at school, where they might be in this transactional stage, and in that information, the PLEP, the present level of performance, they say they don't communicate. They don't talk. And what I think people are looking for is that third piece, is that relational piece. So I think when we think of they can't communicate, or we want them to communicate, us as neurotypical people, or I'm assuming, want them to get to that relational stage where they're talking just like we would talk, and they are considering feelings and, the social situation. And I think sometimes we forget about these first two categories. It's all communication. Okay. And a lot of times when we work therapeutically with people, this relational stage is more of that carryover piece. Language doesn't come easily to many people. So you have multitude of practice that you need to do before you can get to that relational stage, where some people just acquired it naturally. And that's important to remember. All right. So other important things to remember is we're all learning just at different paces and levels of intensity. Okay. So for example, if I said right now, where do you fall? Are you above average, average, below average with typical piano players? I would be far below average. I could hit the keys. I could not play anything, probably even Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star, right? Learning another language. Where would you fall in the above average, average, below average category with French? Well, yeah, I had 1 year of French in high school to go to Italy, and then I stopped. So I would be in the far below average category. When we compare ourselves to groups, no matter what the group is, you're going to fall in a certain realm outside of that group. So it is hard when tests kind of say above average, below average, far below average, or sometimes they even say unable to interpret because the score was so low, right? But we have to look at where a child is right now in order to grow, okay? We have to look at where the person is right now and look at the next step on the staircase versus saying where they need to end up. Because in reality, even for all of us, we don't know where we're going to end up. What does 5 years look like now? What did 5 years look like yesterday or last? Are you where you are now, where you thought you were going to be? Right? So it's really hard sometimes to map out the next 5, 10, 13 IEP years. And we often forget sometimes to look at just the next step. It's also imperative to know and understand that your loved one is learning differently instead of not learning at all. They still have the ability to learn and to launch on a forward trajectory. Okay, and your loved one is still a person and can have things that they love to do. So I won't get on a tangent too much, but I do that sometimes. But I have an example of when I was in graduate school, you have a supervisor and you're tagging along with them with their job. And as I mentioned before, I have a special needs sister. She's older than me by 3 years. So at the time, I believe I was 21, so she would have been 24. And I was sharing with my supervisor just about my sister and things she likes to do. And I said, oh, she really likes dolls, not in the sense of taking care of the baby dolls, but kind of like to display them. So kind of like those American Girl dolls, and things like that, and like to present them in her room. And my supervisor said, well, she shouldn't be doing that. She's 24 years old. You guys should really talk to her about that. And if you don't know me, I can be a little scrappy. So I said, well, maybe. And I happened to glance back. We were driving in the car together and I saw her whole backseat of her car was covered in Beanie Babies. And I said, it's kind of a nice Beanie Baby collection you have. And she was a 60-year-old woman. And she kind of understood what I was getting at. But you see that though? I mean, we all have interests, right? We all have deep interests and they might not fit someone else's interest bubble. I don't think I've ever owned a Beanie Baby, but Alice owned a lot of them. And if my sister wanted to display dolls and spend her money on something for them, so what? Didn't bother anybody. And she loved it. And she still likes it. So it's completely okay to be you, but we have to sometimes account for the environment, account for consequences, and account for the quantity of things we like. Okay? So for example, I'm here at a conference talking about communication. If I came up here and talked about The Office and everything I loved about The Office, I would like that, but that's not why you're here. So I could do that for an hour, but it wouldn't be very fruitful or helpful, right? So sometimes we have to account for the environment we're in. And also the consequences of things. Okay, and same thing for quantity. We might not be able to play with American Girl dolls and take all 20 of them to grandma's for Thanksgiving. Okay, we can take one. And that's okay. We will get to that point. I think sometimes when we are working with someone with special accommodations, we might think that any reduction is like a punishment, so that we can't take all 20 dolls, we can just take one. Might feel really tough, especially for that person. They want to take all 20, right? And for us, we think as a caregiver myself, like, should I let her take 20? Do I want to fight this battle right now? But again, depending on the person and the therapeutic interventions we can do, we can definitely help with things like that. So speaking specifically about autism, there are certain characteristics that I feel are more common than others. And I usually get questions a lot about these characteristics and what to do next. So I mentioned in the beginning that this presentation was some practical things or explaining the why behind certain types of communication. So I wanted to delve into these a little bit more. The first one is echolalia, which is repeating what you say, either partially or completely. There's also something known as delayed echolalia. So I encounter that quite a bit. It would be, again, a person maybe reciting a movie line they like, or using phrases to maybe regulate themselves more, something they've heard in the past that they are repeating to help them get through a certain social or personal situation. Down in the last box there, we've learned a little more lately in the research that these people can be what we consider Gestalt language processors. Okay, so what we're learning is that neurotypical people learn language in a different way than people who are not neurotypical. The best way I've heard this described to me is that if you've ever played a sport, I'll use baseball as an example, and you went to little kid baseball, they'd say, this is a base. Okay, everyone look here, this is a base, right? We're going to run to this base. This is first base. And then this is second base, and then third. So we learn each step at a time. That's kind of the neurotypical way to learn language. If you remember in school, this is a noun. This is how we use them. Now we're going to put the next to it, and you learn bit by bit by bit. But we're learning that the Gestalt language processors learn language a completely different way. So going back to the baseball example, Gestalt language processors might need to see the entire game being played for about 10 minutes. And they look at it and then they go, got it. Right? But they might miss those individual pieces. So for example, if they didn't see someone steal a base in that 10 minutes where they learned the entire game, they might not know how to do that, obviously. So we'd have to show them individually. Something that helps tremendously with people that are using echolalia. So again, we have to look at the situation, which again, if you're a caregiver, I'll mention this later in the presentation as well, but your job is to be the caregiver. It can feel very overwhelming and can burn you out very quickly to wear all the hats. And I know you're thinking, well, and who's going to wear all the other hats, right? So sometimes you have to do it all. But we're here to help as well. So what we do is sometimes look at the situation itself. So for example, with echolalia, if I have a child that's going, everything's gonna be fine, Mickey, everything's gonna be fine, Mickey, from a Mickey Mouse Clubhouse, that's because they're distressed and they're trying to use a phrase to regulate themselves or to remind themselves that they will feel okay. Okay. If it's something that they're repeating, oh yeah, of course. So the comment was with her son, she has to say something 3 times, right?
I mean, all the studies and things I've ever done, to say something 3 times to anybody, you're not typical vertebrates, it takes 3 times to break any kind of direction. But I don't say, look at me, I'll just say, I'll point to my nose, not to say, and repeat it 3 times, and I'll probably say 3 times to say 3 times. What did I say? 2 seconds, 5 times later, that's what they said. But
yeah.
They'll tell me to say it 3 times.
Yeah. Yeah. So the audience member was saying that with her son, they had talked about saying something 3 times for him to really kind of start to grasp that concept and even moving to like a nonverbal cue at that point. And he kind of remembers what that cue is. And that's a really good point, because what I had mentioned earlier is that you're the expert. I'm the helper. So in that situation, I would be coming to you going, tell me all the things. I want to know that, if I need to know it works now, instead of going in and just starting from square one. That's great. It's excellent. Another characteristic in autism can present as what we call hyperlexia, which is maybe when they were younger or starting the verbal stage, they knew a whole lot of things. They knew all the letters, all the numbers. They might have known presidents of other countries. They could spell words, but they had no functional words. In my experience as a speech therapist, when I do testing, often with children or people that are beginning to enter therapy, this will look like they have a really high vocabulary score and a very low like language score. And again, for people on the other side of that spectrum, people might say, well, he can talk. I'm like, yep, he can talk, but can he talk maybe to you or to someone else? Or they might say something like, well, he knows every state and capital and the population of the capital city, like, yeah, that's great too, though. And we need to also, like we talked about, account for the environment, account for where we want to go, and we can start molding that into what we would like for that person to succeed. Another characteristic I see often is what we call rote recital. So a person can count, do the ABCs, sing songs they like, either independently or a part of what they heard. So for example, that might look like if you are holding up a flashcard that says A, and then all of a sudden the person starts singing the ABCs, right? It was almost like a trigger to get them going into a rote thing that they knew. Again, that's where a therapist can really look at that, because sometimes the rote recital is something they need to regulate, right? So for example, I had a student that every time he was going to a birthday party or some sort of gathering, a family dinner on a Sunday, that's a different experience for someone who has sensory difficulties, right? So it's a lot of people, it's a lot of unexpected conversations. So often he would hum to himself, have the happy birthday song, because if you think about it, every time, usually you're with a bunch of people and there's food and there's things, it might be a birthday party. So he would kind of prep himself and kind of start to get into the birthday mode, we called it. Other rote recital could be that people are filling in those gaps, okay? Echolalia is the same way. A lot of times if we see someone using echolalia or rote recital, they don't know what else they should be saying. So for example, using Mickey Mouse Clubhouse, if a person was ready to go, they'd say, come on, Mickey, let's go, every time they'd leave the house. Okay. So again, for a speech therapy standpoint, instead of just noting they use echolalia, they do. How can we get them to use a functional phrase in this activity? So again, are they, quote, not communicating? Are they, quote, not able to tell us that they're leaving, or, quote, not able to report events? Like, they sure are, just using Mickey Mouse to do it until we fill that in for them. So if you have someone who is using that echolalia, like, let's go, Mickey, time to go. I always say, if you've heard of the phrase parallel talk, to talk to yourself. Okay, so you say, we are going to grandma's, let's go to grandma's. And eventually when you do that enough, you might hear them imitate you. Let's go to grandma's. And then eventually you might have them say it on their own. And that's where a therapist can walk you through those steps. Okay. All right, so we talked about the expressive language and those three types, right? So that primal survival, when we are using expressive language, might look like grunting and pointing, physical movement. So if a child isn't using verbal communication yet and they want a snack, what do you think they would do? Climb up the cabinet and go get it. So are they not communicating? Or are they letting you know that they were hungry and they're going to take matters into their own hands and go get the snack themselves? Again, it also might look like biting and hitting. If you think about it, I won't get on another tangent for long, but sometimes we often presume that children or people that aren't speaking don't understand what we're saying or doing. Okay. So often when I work with middle schoolers and high schoolers that are not verbal communicators, they're very used to people just doing things for them, and sometimes not in a very presuming of competence type way. So a lot of times is, if I get scratched or hit or bit, it's because I moved my hand and they probably thought I was either going to physically manipulate them to get up or take something away that they wanted. Because if you think about it, if you've seen a person maybe at a school setting or, that has support in some way and aid, a lot of times as helping professionals, your job is to help. So you just rush in and go, oh, okay, here, we'll move this, we'll move this. Okay, I'm moving your chair. They don't even say it. They just move and guide the elbow to stand up. And I just know for myself, I wouldn't like that in any way, right? If someone just walked in and just grabbed my elbow, and of course I go like this. And sometimes those people can be labeled as defiant. And we have to look at maybe why they're communicating that way. Because again, we don't normally go up to people and just have no communication verbally with them and just pick them up out of their chair, right? Yeah. Yes. Yes. One of our fabulous OT audience members just shared, especially with sensory differences, those responses to touch, and things like that can be really alarming and alerting for someone, where they are going to go into that primal survival communication, right? Especially from speech standpoint, if they don't have a lot of words already, how on earth would we expect someone, when you go up behind them and start to pick them up, to go, excuse me, I don't really prefer that. I would like to sit here more and enjoy my fruit snacks, right? No, they're going to move to the path of least resistance, which is the mode that they use the most. Okay, so transactional again, is that echolalia, filling in the blanks, back and forth verbalizing with another person. But that's to get an immediate need met. Again, we talk about like giving your credit card to get some groceries, giving a picture card to get something. It's still communication, definitely. But when we get to that relational piece, it's when they're able to use those skills in different situations. All right, so reasons that children may not be understandable or may have difficulty is they might have underlying issues, such as apraxia of speech, articulation, or phonological disorders. Okay, so people that are pre-verbal, if it's already hard to talk and we've spent years in the primal survival mode, and now we start to use some words and realize they aren't coming out quite right, they might say, I'm out. This did not work. This is too hard, right? If you think about it, sometimes just walking to the fridge and getting a drink is a lot easier than getting someone's attention, possibly making eye contact, and requesting. Okay. We talked about that filling in the blank. They might fill in the blank with sounds, or other things that they've learned from shows, movies, or other things that have been said to them. A lot of times I say people usually will talk in second person. So if I was using that kind of echolalia to fill in the blank and someone said to me, it's time to go, I might say, get up, Lauren, get your shoes on, Lauren. It's time to go, Lauren, because they've heard that. They've heard someone speaking to them that way, and they're using that phrase to kind of walk them through the steps. Okay. Again, often when people are using the scripts, it's like that baseball game I described. They saw the whole game. They saw the Mickey Mouse clubhouse and them leaving the clubhouse. But they typically don't know what each individual word is. They didn't learn that baseball game step by step by step. Okay. So it might be time to go. Even if you have had children that were toddlers growing up, you might have had kids that say, what's that? What's that? They didn't know what was. Obviously, it's a hard one. The apostrophe S symbolized, they didn't know that. They just know saying that all together and pointing meant that mom or dad or somebody would label that for me, right? So even for kind of neurotypical toddlers, that's a transactional experience. They go, what's that? What's that? They knew that meant you'll tell me what that is. Okay. I didn't add this slide in, but I think it's really important to note, and yet another tangent, but we hear often this term presumed competence, and I wish sometimes there was a better term for it that I could think of, but it's so true. I think people, again, like I said, that just kind of do things for people that are pre-verbal or not using verbal language. They kind of assume that maybe they're not able to think for themselves, to react or do things on their own, and we have to presume that they can. It also works for receptive language, what they hear. I have an example of a child I worked with that I came on the scene when they were 10, and they were in that primal survival mode. Everything was a scratch, like a deep gouge scratch. They would scratch people and dig into their skin. And if you got close enough, they would bite. And knowing just from our experience, and I worked with another fabulous OT, we kind of said to each other, has anyone ever told him that that hurts? I mean, and I still have some scars, but this person would dig and scratch within a half an hour session, probably 10 times, to the point where we thought maybe we should be getting, you know, those guards on our forearms. And it's sad for even me to think that was our first thought was, you know, should we get some sort of equipment or protection? And we said, I wonder if we just told him it hurt, that it hurt us when that happened. So we spent a few weeks doing that. Every time you do that, I said, that really hurt. Like, oh, that hurt. And within about a month, it vanished completely. Because you know, again, because people can't communicate verbally doesn't mean they don't have feelings, needs, and can communicate anything else. So he is a very caring child. So when we said that really, oh, that really hurt. See, oh, okay, that hurts, but we're going to continue, right? So the deep gouge and hold was still happening a while. Then it turned into a little one and then a rub. He would rub my hand. And then it went to a this and a pause and put it down. And within about a month of years of him doing that, all because we said, let's just tell him that it hurts when he does that. And we know he doesn't want to hurt people, but we'll help him. And then that was enough. And he was a completely non-verbal, non-speaking communicator. So I also hear a lot of questions about AAC with pre-verbal individuals, people that aren't using verbal communication. And this may be an option for you. There's a lot of debate, even with speech therapists, on tech options. So we kind of do wrestle with that, presuming competence with overwhelming, okay? When I was in graduate school, the way we learned it was you start with low tech with those picture symbols and move your way up, right? And I actually still am a pretty strong believer in that. With, you know, presuming competence, sometimes we have other people that believe, let's just give them the iPad fully loaded and ready to go, right? And we do have some people that once they get that device can be really proficient in it. Okay, so it is a balance. You have to look at the individual person. You have to look at, you know, the support system of families and teachers or paras or group home, you know, workers that can learn and do these things with the person. I think the struggle is, at least from a caregiver perspective, when we think low tech, we think low hope. Like, they can't use this device, so we're going to give them a picture book. And that's usually not the case at all. It's to work on that transactional piece before we move to, now you have 800 options, right? We're going to start with maybe 20. Yeah.
This is maybe a different type of thing, like it's a response to us, something that say, I think I'm gonna to maybe they'll respond to the picture, respond to the image, or maybe they need the actual object. Sound.
Yeah.
So I think kids that need the project piece also probably need to start with the tech piece.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yep, our audience member shared, you know, that it reminds her of cueing and that you sometimes have to walk it back and work on, you know, lower presentation to build up, right? Am I summarizing that? Okay. Exactly. And I really think of, you know, you can apply most of these, the things we're trying to get our loved ones to learn is nothing new even in our world. And we put it in our own bubble. For example, sometimes when I'm really hungry and really cranky, I don't want 800 options of what I could eat. Just give me like 3. I'll, you know, do you want a cheeseburger? Do you want to, you know, grab piece pizza? I don't want to sift through 800 options. It'll make me more cranky. And that might not be you. You might want the 800 options, you know. I think with low tech, also the concern for caregivers, and I've seen it, and I've been a part of it myself, is that therapists, particularly in the school systems too, are very overwhelmed, very overworked, and spread incredibly thin. So sometimes it can feel that the low option that you chose, you'll be locked into that for quite a long time. And sometimes that can happen. Okay. So low tech to high tech can be a really long process or a really speedy process, depending on all these different factors. And as a caregiver, it can be very overwhelming to think that you have to be the one advocating for all of those factors, right? And if you decide to go with an actual AAC device, like for lack of a better term, like an iPad, right? A dedicated device for communication, a speech pathologist must become involved and write a report if you're submitting it to insurance companies. Okay. The question was, will insurance cover the devices? The short answer is yes. There's always caveats with insurance, as we know. Especially if you're on like medical assistance, they will. They often have a lot of requirements. It could be a very lengthy process. And often insurance companies will require that you've tried at least 3 other options before a device. Okay. So a lot of times, even if we think a person is a really great candidate for an AAC device, we have to try the low tech, like a picture symbol option, and say something like, you know, we tried this picture book with 20 pictures, but the person was more frustrated because they have a vocabulary that could support selecting from 100 pictures, and things like that. But yes, so I'm using medical assistants, for example. They do approve devices and typically equipment like the case and like a wheelchair mounted, things like that. But there's also some limitations, like for example, I don't want to get too specific, but like MA, depending on the age, they might allow 1 device every 7 years. So that's again why a speech therapist will be really integral in helping you pick the right one, because it has to grow with your loved one. Okay. So we talked about those low tech options, you know, usually picture cards, a first then. So I don't know if everyone's familiar with first and then, but it's breaks down the time structure for people who, I mean, time is a really abstract concept, right? Later, if you've told a person later, what does that mean? We're going to go later. You know, if you tell a child, we're going to go to, has anyone made the mistake of saying, we're going to go somewhere really exciting next week? And then you hear about it every 5 minutes, possibly. So first then really breaks down the requirement for a person to know what's next. So it might say like first grandma's, then Pizza Hut, right? It's just really clear cut and picture symbol. And you can kind of refer back to it. Because if you think about it, if you're speaking to a person that has a hard time processing language, and time is a really abstract concept in itself, if you're driving to grandma's and saying, it's okay, when we're done with grandma's about 2-3 o'clock, then we'll, you know, I got to run to the post office and then we'll go to Pizza Hut. And then we kind of wonder why they get really stressed out and ask about Pizza Hut a lot, because they didn't really, it's a really abstract sequence of events that they had to piece together. And that first then can help with that, or a picture schedule. If you've had a child in school that needed extra supports, picture schedules are pretty typical. I even see them in general education classrooms now, because it really helps the demand on a student to process verbal instruction. We also use buttons quite frequently. So for those unfamiliar, it's not like buttons on a shirt. It's a big button typically, and you can program them to have one message or multiple messages on them. We use this quite a bit to start the communicative process, because again, we want to take maybe that primal survival communication of maybe running away, right? If we have a student who's running out of the classroom to maybe go see their old teacher, that happens a lot. We'll move it to a button that says, I want to go talk to Miss Anderson. Oh, okay, let's go, right? And we want to do one step at a time, okay? So at first, it might be a little annoying, but you have to reinforce it. So sometimes it's, I want to go see Miss Anderson. Okay, we're going, right? All right, we're going to go. Yep. And then you start accounting for the environment or consequences. So it might be, oh, I know, we're going to go see her. And then you might bring out like a visual schedule, or let's set a timer. We're going to go see her at 10 o'clock. Good telling me that you wanted to go see Miss Anderson. Right now she's in gym. So we'll set the timer. When the timer beeps, we'll go see Miss Anderson, and you push the button. Okay. And then as far as picture cards go, we always want to make sure as well that they understand what the picture card is. Okay. So that's where a speech therapist can really help, because some of those pictures are really abstract. If you've seen sort of the picture symbols before with like the stick figures and things like that, it's a program called Board Maker. It's really familiar in like the speech and special education teaching area. But man, some of those pictures don't make any sense. You know, you might have a picture of, I don't know. Sometimes we look at it and go, that's what they picked for sharing. You know, that looks nothing like share. So how are we supposed to expect a person who's learning to communicate to understand that that means share? Okay. So a lot of times we will try to start with real pictures and pictures of them in their own environment. Okay. Or their friends sharing, or their brother or sister sharing, and be like, look, that's sharing. Because then they'll see those people doing it again. Okay. Versus taking, you know, kind of a stick figure situation and trying to apply it to what's happening in real time. This is where kids and people that use that echolalia, or the delayed echolalia of the let's go Mickey, we're going to leave to the clubhouse. We might use pictures of the thing they like. Okay. So we might say, you know, oh, look, you know, Chase from Paw Patrol is, you know, going to the car, you know, and they love it. They absolutely love it. But we have to get into their world instead of just saying, this is the standard and I'll meet you here. So we talked about this, you know, how to help at this stage, verbalize for them if necessary. So again, if it's time to go, Mickey, you don't have to say, and you don't, but you say, oh, we are going to grandma's. All right, let's go to grandma's, right? And we want to connect with other parents too for some play experiences, or cousins or brothers and sisters and things like that. But again, that puts a lot of burden on you as the caregiver. Okay, so that's where a therapist, teacher, social worker could really help. If you say, look, I just really need to connect with another parent, or do you have another kid on your caseload that might be a really good match for Braden? And, you know, 9 times out of 10, our answer is yeah. Okay. And to find and learn about adapted programs in the community. I mean, how great is the Autism Resource Guide for just having a one-stop pamphlet for all this information? And you guys are still looking all the time for something in your spare time, right? And things that can help, and social groups and things for winter and adaptive sports. And it's very, very, very overwhelming. And there's a lot of people like Michelle and us that can help you with that. So again, this all goes to a relational understanding to help people have that social communication. I mean, how vital is just social reciprocity and love and understanding? I mean, can you imagine if you did not have, you know, a friend group or a friend or something you look forward to, even if it is a birthday party once a year, right? And sometimes, again, like we talked about with that presuming competence, is that these people and children have feelings and needs and want friends, and they might not know how to make those friends. Okay. And sometimes, unfortunately, people that have a desire to make friends might make friends that aren't the right fit for them. Right. But social groups, even at a young communicative stage, is crucial. Okay. Sometimes it can take a lot for a caregiver to want to make that step, because you might be joining, let's say, like a Girl Scout troop or something, right? And your child doesn't speak yet. So you think, I'm going to be, you know, seeing all these other kids at my child's age, she's not communicating, but they're communicating. Or what if they don't let her come into the Girl Scout troop? And I think that's where, you know, advocates and just giving it a shot is going to really be fruitful. I run a Girl Scout troop, that's why I use the example, but you know, we have all abilities in that group, and it's just been so fun. And just to see everyone enjoying everyone is just in itself the reason I do it. So it also allows the child the opportunity to feel comfortable in a setting with peers. Okay. And again, we can't expect mastery the first time. This is going to take practice. I mean, were any of you at a middle school dance? Girls, boys, awkwardness, right? Like, but then by high school, that changed a lot, right? You were comfortable going to those things, you know? I always find it interesting sometimes with what we, social skills groups to say, okay, everyone's going to work on social skills and here's some pizza and games and go be social. Go ahead. They need instruction, right? We need to help and guide and instruct. We can provide the opportunity. We can also provide the instruction for those people that are processing social language differently. I just think of my family members, my husband and friends. I can go into a crowd and say, hi, I'm Lauren. Who are you? It's nice to meet you. I love your shirt. Some other people are like, no, thank you. I'll be, sipping water in the back and people watching. Okay. Your nonverbal communicator has a personality as well. And that might be introverted or extroverted. We need to find that out. Okay. Just like that child who leaves the classroom to go find their favorite teacher. Wants to be a social guy, wants to go see what everyone else is doing. Okay. So that's why it's important too, when we talk about that parallel talk and kind of quote talking to yourself, right? It's really important for kids that are learning how to do things. So for example, even in a social group, I'll use my Girl Scout troop as an example. If you have a non-speaking communicator, I might say something like, might get down on her level and go to another girl and be like, can you show me what you did? And just talk for her, right? And again, that's where we might use a button to say that. Or if they have a device. There are some things, what I call more of like the meta social skills. So that's if you've heard of things like super flex. They don't use that much often anymore, but zones of regulation. That's to really teach people, this is what you're feeling. This is the social, behavior that you're exhibiting. And it's more of like a metacognitive level of instruction. We do use that as well sometimes. And again, sometimes social, if you think about kids in general or what you were like growing up as a kid, what was the first social types of things you did? Were you social before you were speaking in full sentences? Of course, right? If you had siblings or neighbors or cousins, what did you do to be social? Played, right? And sometimes people at that beginning, verbal stage need that cause and effect. It's really hard to navigate. Like I said, people's social cues, right? So if you make a group of 6 boys and say, go ahead, have fun, that's a lot for them to take on. So it's just, we're going to play this type of game that's very back and forth. We might not be playing Risk right away. We might be playing catch. Okay. Might be playing like table ping pong to show this is how this works, back and forth, back and forth. We're all taking turns and we're all hopefully having a good time. So with all this information, I said I didn't want to overwhelm you. Where do we begin? My best advice is start simply. Okay. Sometimes we feel like as caregivers, we do all of it all. What's that movie? Everything, Allwhere, or Everywhere, All at Once. You do not, because you're not feeling like you're keeping up speed with supporting your loved one doesn't mean you're failing at all. Okay. So start simply. 1 step on the staircase is all you need. Even if it's making a note on your calendar to call a social worker, to make a call later. Okay. I'm that person who has a to-do list that's like very broken down, like bring laundry downstairs, like open walk, so I can cross it off, right? But if it was clean the entire house, like I don't like that. It's like a big chore for one to-do list cross off. I need multiple. So I start simply as well. And seek outside help. And again, I realize that puts the burden back on you too. But I want to just preface that with saying that doesn't mean, okay, I'm going to have to find a counselor for myself and get on a wait list and then maybe see if I can make a friend. Just tell someone you're struggling. tell someone you need some help. And I think, you'd be amazed with the people that'll rally around professionally, personally, just to say I need some help. And I have like decision fatigue. I can't do all of this. But I need some help. Okay, so what does this all mean? Obviously, you're not alone, but it can feel very isolating, right? To have a loved one that is not communicating or communicating in a way that might come across as communicating in an unloving type of way, right? But I will say, and I realize that professionals don't typically give guarantees, but I own my own practice, so I can do what I want. Every person I've ever worked with has grown in some way. I've never had a person come to me or from me or beyond, and they just stayed stagnant the whole time. So I know it feels that way in the moment and might feel that way for a while, but they will grow, and they will grow beautifully. Please ignore ages on milestone charts and testing for your own sake. Again, if I compared you all to professional piano players, I would have a really low score, right? I'd have a really low score in a French class with people that probably already knew French. Okay. And, language is hard to understand because we don't have like tactical steps, right? I think often of like my counterparts, like physical therapy. It's like, okay, this is broken. This is where it's broken. So we're going to do this, this, and this. And you come in twice a week for a month and then it'll be fine, right? It'll be fixed. And with language, it can feel like a big web of confusion because it is all intertwined and it is very complex. We talked about that a little earlier, time concepts, right? After grandma's next week, we're going to go to, McDonald's together. Okay. So I always talk about WH questions. Okay. So they're having a lot of fun over there. For the audience listening, the song Love Shack is playing next door. So I don't have fun songs. So you might have gone to the wrong presentation, but I often sometimes hear people say, and that's why a speech therapist can be really helpful, is, well, they have a hard time answering questions, right? You got to think about different questions. So like, what is this is a question. What was the name of your teacher that you saw yesterday at Target is also a what question. Very different, right? Yeah. Yep. If you hold up a picture of like McDonald's, you say, where's this? Right? Versus, where did we go with Aunt Janice Saturday? Tell them, right? That includes the place, working memory, time, recalling the event, all those things. So again, a speech therapist can really help go, okay, this is what we can do, and we can break that question down, or we need to start over here a little bit. Okay. And hopefully you guys understand and have learned a little more of how communication is tied to everything. So again, I really don't like the term not communicative. They're not communicating. They're not, don't have any expressive language. Usually those are used to explain that someone isn't using verbal communication, but everything's communication. Okay. I usually use examples as well of if you picture yourself going to a foreign country and you don't know the language, okay? I might use this gentleman's, and I just go like this. And I'm making eye contact with you and I'm doing this. What are you going to do? Did I communicate with him without speaking? Yes. Right? He had to guess a little bit, but I mean, he kind of was like, oh, she's looking at me and she's really looking at me and she's shaking the paper. So I'm just going to take it and we'll see what happens. Right? Or have you ever been really busy and you have a spouse or a friend and you all of a sudden crinkle up a piece of paper, you're like, what does that mean? Go throw it away, right? So there's communication everywhere, okay? And if you think about mood, tone, you can say I'm fine about 18 different ways and it means 18 different things. I'm fine. Are you really though? Oh yeah, I'm fine. All those things can mean different things as well. And like I always say, always be a caregiver first and then ask for help with the rest. I realize that you do end up wearing a lot of the hats a lot of the times. But I always tell people, because I get it quite often too, and it's very helpful, you know, what can I do at home? What can I do tomorrow? Like, can I take this book home and read it? Sure. But be mom tonight, be dad tonight. I'll go and take him to the park. You know, what can I work on? Playing at the park. Be mom and dad and play at the park and have a really good time. We're going to grandma's. What should we work on? Hugging grandma. And then I'll see you next week and we'll do some more things, right? So I really wanted to thank you so much for coming here for a loved one. It's Saturday, right? Saturday morning. You know, there's a lot of other things that you could be doing and probably feel like you should be doing. But you know, also came here for yourself to get support and to learn. And I just really appreciate you trusting me with providing you with that information. I'm available for questions now. We still have a little bit of time, I believe, a couple minutes, and then I'll also be here sporadically throughout the day at our booth with some snacks. And if I'm not here, still go get the snacks. And you can always contact us at Owl Therapy, or we're in the resource guide too if you forget and look back later. Okay. Any immediate questions? Okay. Well, thank you. And next door claps for the other speaker. I'll claps for everyone. Okay. Well, great. Thank you for coming, and have a really great rest of your conference day, whatever you're choosing to do today. And we'll be here. Okay. Thank you.